she had the hearing today. Everyone can see it.
He's gaveling us in.
I've got a letter dated March 16th, dear councilors, please nominate the Sauer position of Associate Justice for the Probate and Court. This nomination is advice and consent of the Executive Council pursuant to Part 2, Chapter 2 of the Constitution of the Commonwealth of Massachusetts. Sincerely, Charles Baker. Excuse me. Excuse me.
Let's go. Come on, we got a hearing. Hey, Paul.
At this point, I'd like to introduce the other members of the council. Councilor Hurley's here, Councilor Jubenville, Councilor Kennedy, Councilor Devaney, Councilor DiPaolo, and Councilor Farrar. Good afternoon. At this point, I know you've been waiting, and I know we have some distinguished folks who are here. Let's hear from those witnesses at this point. And on your list is the retired Honorable Dorothy Gibson. You can stand over here, and I'll sit for you.
Actually, do you mind if I sit?
Yeah, that's fine.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to say good afternoon to all of the governor's councilors. I know you've had a long morning, and I know you still have other matters on your agenda, so I'm going to be as brief and concise as I know. I will be trying to be brief and concise.
We're hungry.
I am too. So.
We're about to become hangry.
Excuse me, please.
All right. Now, I've known Attorney Sauer for approximately, 18 years or so. I met her first when she became a law clerk at Probate Family Court in 2004, and she served in that position until 2006. And at that point, she went out into private practice. I find that Nan has the advantage with her experience in the domestic relations as a domestic relations practitioner in the firm of Lee and Rivers. And she joined as an associate as soon as she left the Probate Family Court. She's also a founding partner in the law firm of Roberts and Sauer, which was founded in 2016, and then ultimately opened her own firm in Burlington in 2022, beginning this year. While she was a law clerk, Attorney Sauer was responsible for research, writing of memoranda, and editing orders and judgments, as well as aiding various judges in preparation of post-trial documentation, which is voluminous in the Probate Family Court, unlike the other divisions of the trial court department. A particular assistance to Attorney Sauer also is her exposure while a law clerk to the probate side of the court. Because the probate side, although contested matters before the court that go to trial generally in the domestic relations area, we at times have contested matters in the probate area. So a judge needs to know a little bit about both of those areas. Now, Attorney Sauer has a lot of experience in the domestic side, and she, I assume, it's been a long time since she clerked in the Probate Family Court, but at that point in time, she was required to do both domestic relations cases as well as probate and family court, probate side of the court. So I think that's a distinct advantage for her, because a lot of the new judges coming on have only had the domestic relations experience, and it leaves them at a loss, and it takes a long time to learn the probate area. So, her term as a law clerk left her very well prepared to meet the high demands for written orders and judgments, which she produced as a judge, the volume of which is unmatched in any other court departments, as I mentioned before. There are generally what we call findings, which is an explanation of a case and why a decision was made. And those are required in an inordinate amount of cases and different situations in the Probate Family Court. She's always, at the time she was with Lee and Rivers, she appeared before me on numerous cases. I always found her to present herself in a professional manner. She's respectful, she's engaging, and she demonstrates the demeanor of good trial judge should exhibit. All around, I really find Attorney Nan Sauer to be a highly qualified attorney to assume the role of Associate Justice in the Probate Family Court. And I hope you look favorably on her nomination.
Thank you very much. Good to see you. Next, we'll hear from Attorney Martin Kane.
Thank you, members of the council. Martin Kane. I know we're very busy today, so I'm going to keep it brief. Thank you. I've known Nan for a long time. I've had cases against her. I've worked with her on cases. She has the temperament. She has the intellect. What's most important to me is the evidentiary foundation. A lot of people don't think evidence is used in the probate family court, and it's going to be fantastic. I thank the governor. I thank the lieutenant governor. And I thank all of you because she will be a welcome addition, much needed addition to the probate family court. We had cases where highly contested valuation issues, straightforward, as Justice Gibson just said, straightforward, honest, hardworking. She is, I wish every opposing counsel was a Nan Sauer. I will miss being on the other side of the case with her because I trust her. I know that she's very smart. We had one case that was not a valuation case, but it had to do with both property division and income, and the commingling of the two, where her client received a big loan as an advance against his work. And she had her position, I had my position. We sat there, talked about it, and we were able to come to a resolution on how we both thought the outcome should be. So my point is, she listens, she's going to be attentive, she's going to be a tremendous judge, and as Justice Gibson said, she's got both sides with the divorce and the estate side. I wholeheartedly, without any hesitation, would ask you to vote favorably for Nan Sauer.
Thank you. Councilor Ferrari.
I just want to say thank you. When you come into the room, it means a whole lot to me, who never goes to probate court. But I really respect your opinion, so thank you for coming in.
Thank you very much. Marty, if people don't know, is one of the premier divorce lawyers in the Commonwealth. You do a great job. Thank you, Councilor Rose.
How many divorce cases have you actually tried to conclusion, as opposed to the number? What's your percentage of trials?
Personally, myself,
Right.
I tried more cases, because the cases that come to our firm are complex in financial as to business valuation, complex with custody issues, abuse, sexual abuse allegations. So I would tell you that I tried, my firm and myself personally, to answer your question, tried more cases than the average probate and family court lawyer. I was a prosecutor beforehand. I probably tried 500 jury trials and maybe 2,000 plus bench trials before I even entered the probate and family court.
What would you say is the normal number of trials that a probate practitioner would normally,
The average probate,
percentage, average?
Sure. The average probate practitioner, I would tell you, 90 to 95% of these cases settle. Yes. And so the average practitioner, maybe 1 or 2 a year, to answer your question.
Okay.
And they may not be a 4-day complex, with competing expert witnesses. They may be a simple 208-34 where the parties don't agree and the judge needs to make the decision.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much. At this point, we'll hit Councilor Vane.
David, tell me, how many cases have you had with tsunami?
I would say, I have to go back, probably half a dozen.
Is there one case that impressed you about her, that stood out?
Yeah, I think that case that I just talked about, so Nan had the husband, I had the wife, and my client was difficult, to be sure. And the husband had the mindset it was his money. But Nan and I, when we initially talked about it, we were diametrically opposed as to how it should come up. After we spent time together, I listened to her, she listened to me. We were able to formulate a strategy that we both thought would be acceptable by the court, most importantly, and was fair given the length of this marriage and how the income would impact, meaning my client.
Right, so what would hear about that?
Well, so interestingly, I released my plan. She was difficult. And so I don't know, I think it is, you can tell me, is it scheduled for trial that case?
Scheduled for trial in July.
I think my client is on the lawyer number 5 or 6, so
Wow.
I wish her the best.
Yeah. So, if you could tell us one attribute that stands out about that personality, what would it be?
Well, I would tell you, her legal acumen is what sticks out. So when we have that discussion about income, is it an asset or is it income? If it's an asset in a long-term marriage, then generally the other side is going to get 50%. If it's income, then that number 50% might go down to 22%, 25%, 28%. And when you're talking big numbers, that's a big difference. So we had a very good legal exchange about cases. She could cite this case right off the top of her head, that case right off the top, and I'd give it back to her. It was a tennis match that ultimately we got to a place that I think, I wouldn't be surprised when that case goes to trial if the judge doesn't see it the way we brought it up. The only downside for this applicant is that she went to Notre Dame instead of Boston College.
That's okay.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
I have to,
Change the whole,
I have,
the whole complexion.
well, I have to tell you.
Thank you very much.
I have a daughter, and I have a daughter and son, and I have 2 grandchildren from BC, and my son-in-law, that's my daughter, I met him. So we're BC.
Fantastic. That's right.
But I won't hold the bar.
Don't hold it
I
against
told you that, I would hold it against you.
It's hard for me to say
Because
that.
I'm gonna tell you, we had the greatest person in our office, and he was from Judea.
Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr.
At
Chairman.
this point, we'll hear from the nominee, Kelly Squire, Associate Justice of the Probate Family Court.
So I will first very briefly thank everyone for having me today. I want to thank the governor, I want to thank the lieutenant governor for the nomination. I'd also like to thank Bob Ross, Chief Legal Counsel, and Lauren Green, head of the JNC, for shepherding that process. I'd like to thank my witnesses, the Honorable Dorothy Gibson and the esteemed Martin Kane, for speaking on my behalf today. I'd like to thank my colleagues and my friends who are here today who have been sitting out in the waiting area with me, listening to me worry about being here. Thank you so much. It means a lot to me, the support I've gotten. I'd like to also thank my family who could not be here today for their unwavering support of me during this process. I do, it's my understanding that my mother has Mr. McCabe's website bookmarked on her computer so that she can have a listening party later, so thank you for doing that. Most importantly, I want to thank this council for having me today and for considering my nomination. I know that this is a job that is above and beyond other things in your lives that you each have, and I appreciate that you dedicate this time to the Commonwealth. It's an important role, and I really appreciate it. So, I know that you have materials in front of you regarding my professional credentials, so I thought I would focus on my comments and try to keep it brief given the schedule today, just to let you know a little bit more about who I am as a person, as opposed to a lawyer. I was born and raised in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and as you've heard recently, I went to a school that is not Boston College. I and my 2 younger sisters attended public school throughout our schooling through high school. We've each settled on the East Coast. We're in New York, Philadelphia, and Boston. My parents now reside in Aiken, South Carolina. So growing up in Indiana, we enjoyed a very modest lifestyle, often living paycheck to paycheck, I later learned. Didn't know that when I was a kid because my parents made sure we had everything. During school, I participated in a number of sports, including baseball, softball, volleyball, basketball, and track and field. I'm the slowest person on the planet, so I do the discus. Track and field. I was also active in the marching band, the orchestra, and jazz band. My parents were always at our games or events to make sure that we were able to participate in everything we wanted to pursue, even if that meant that they would forego something themselves. My parents both worked outside the home throughout my childhood, and my sisters and I learned to be self-sufficient as a result of that. And that was a good thing. It comes in handy when you're running your own business. With self-sufficiency also comes an awareness that you must rely on your colleagues when you need to bolster your knowledge on a given subject. Should I be appointed, I suspect these skills will continue to come in handy and be essential. So briefly, I want to talk a little bit about my parents because that formed who I am. My mother, when she graduated from high school, couldn't afford to go to college. So she attended beauty school. She worked as a hairdresser when we were little kids. My mother, during my younger years, attended nursing school and became a registered nurse. And so at the age of 34, she got her RN degree. And she worked as a nurse until she retired recently. My father worked as a registered land surveyor, first as an employee and later at the age of 49. He left his employer and started his own business, which he recently reluctantly retired from some 26 years later, and that business still bears his good name. As I reflect upon my parents' respective professional journeys, I realize I've taken similar paths in my own career. Working as a consultant, management and information technology consultant after graduation from Notre Dame, entering law school at the age of 35 after having gone through that consulting career, actually changing careers upon graduation from the New England School of Law at age 39, and that was after working full-time through law school, starting my own law partnership at the age of 50, and now, several years later, hopefully with this council's advice and consent, I hope to be able to carry those lessons that I've learned and the humble roots that I have from my childhood with me into the judiciary if I'm afforded such a tremendous opportunity. I'm going to stop talking now. I had a lot more remarks, but I know that you all are way behind, and I suspect I will be asked some questions that will allow me to say the same thing.
Excuse me, counsel.
So I'll say a few more words, and then I'll look forward to hearing your questions. So a little bit about what I do when I'm not at work. When I have free time, I like to do a couple of different things. I've been actively involved in animal rescue for a long time. For the last 10.5 years or so, I've been a foster home for rescue dogs. So I will care for the dog until he or she gets adopted. And that's been a rewarding activity. I'm proud to have found new homes for a number of dogs, and I always try to trick my friends into adopting dogs so that then I can see the dogs later, see how they are. I also enjoy bike riding for fun, for exercise, but also sometimes for charity. So I've been involved since 2012 with the Best Buddies Challenge Hyena Sport, and for those unfamiliar with Best Buddies, it is an organization that supports folks with developmental disabilities. That is a charity bike ride that can either be 20 miles, 55 miles, or 100 miles, and that depends on how much I've trained in a given year, how far I ride. You still collect the same money, but you sometimes are able to ride further. I'm proud to support that organization and that event. And I dedicate each ride to my cousin's daughter, Maeve. Maeve turns 8 on Saturday. And I hope one day that she will be able to join and ride with me. And I apologize for getting choked up. I also enjoy doing some other things, such as hiking and stand-up paddleboarding with my dogs. The stand-up paddleboarding is always an adventure that often ends in swimming. And I also enjoy live music, and I'm ready after the last 2 years to get back to singing. So I'm going to stop talking now, and I will look forward to your questions.
Thank you very much. Councilor Eileen Duff.
Thank you. I don't have a lot of questions because probate is actually one of the courts I'm very familiar with. I'm familiar with your firm, I'm familiar with your work, and your reputation is stellar. We also desperately need help in the probate court. I'm sure you know. I mean, things are just behind and confusing and everything. And the issues are very, much more complex, I think, than a lot of folks really realize. It sounds like, oh, we can throw some money at that and fix it, and that's not really how it just quite works. You will bring some diversity to the bench, which I appreciate. I think we need it. But the other question, really the main question I want to ask you, because I think it's very relevant, is how do you approach, or your approach in calculating alimony? How's it changed since it's become a non-taxable event?
Sure, since the Tax Cuts
Yeah.
and Job Act of 2017, is that?
Yeah.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, I think the manner in which it's changed is simply that we need to tax affect the number that we calculate right now.
Mhm.
I mean, there's effort to revise the legislation to catch up with
Right.
that Job Act. But in the interim, what we do is we simply make the calculation and then tax affect it. So the statute says that alimony is supposed to be to meet the reasonable needs of the recipient, or to be 30 to 35% of the difference between their gross incomes. And so we take that, if it's a 30 to 35% calculation, we do that calculation, but it's tax affected, so it ends up being a lower percentage. But it still operates in the same way.
Correct.
Yeah.
Right. All right, thank you. Really, that's my main question, because I know a lot about you. I know a lot about your work in the courts. I know, even though you don't live on the North Shore, I know the lawyers on the North Shore who practice in this field. Everyone thinks you're terrific. And you also, you bring a diverse background, having worked in other fields before you came to law school.
Yeah.
And, honestly, it takes a lot of guts to go to law school at 35. Good for you. I wasn't so brave. Good for you.
At the time, it seemed reasonable, but
That's the great thing about youth, right? We don't
that's right.
know what we don't know.
That's right.
But that's what makes it great. Is you, and that's one of the things that I believe in, is the impossible. And I think you're refreshing, Attorney Sauer, to have you here, because you've achieved things that some people would have said you can't do that. And I think it's wonderful. And I do have a couple of family members that went to Notre Dame, so you are forgiven. So anyway, thank you, Mr.
Thank you
Chair.
very much. Councilor Paul DiPaolo.
I have no horse in the Notre Dame BC. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
One thing was alluded to and maybe explicitly stated, but I want to make sure. So you have experience in determining business valuations in the case?
In my cases, sure, yes, I haven't done them personally, we hire people to conduct those business valuations as part of our work, yes.
You've worked as a guardian ad litem.
I have, yeah.
And so could you tell me what the biggest challenges of that job are?
Sure, I think, I really think guardian ad litem is an essential role for many of the cases. And I'm happy to see that role is imposed in where it's needed. The biggest challenge, I would say, in being a guardian ad litem is probably getting access to all the right people that you need to speak with to get a full picture of the situation. And
is it a challenge gathering information from the child?
I mean, it can be, certainly, and a lot of that is dependent upon the child's age. If I'm interviewing a child who is 7, that's a very different interview from a child who is, 15-ish.
Sure.
And has a lot to say.
How do you approach that challenge?
Yeah, well, I think with the younger kids, and Attorney Griffin knows this, she's from my office, I've got actually a set of fidget toys. It's like a lunchbox full of fidget toys.
Sure.
And I'll sit with the kids and we'll actually just start playing with some of the toys, and you get talking with them, or having a contest playing with the toys, and then they begin to talk to you.
That sounds great, and I know how challenging it can be to kind of get a child's trust.
Yeah.
And so what about an adolescent? It's kind of a different set of challenges.
It is a different challenge, but in a way it's a similar interaction, because it's all about really just sort of sitting and being with them and getting to a point where they're comfortable talking with you. So I don't come in guns a-blazing and start peppering them with questions, right? I walk in and I say, hey, do you want a snack? You know.
Yep. And how's that work informed by your knowledge of mental health and child development and such?
Sure. So I'm not a mental health professional, but I certainly have, try to keep up with that area in terms of my reading and my speaking with other people who are mental health professionals.
Okay.
So one of the ways I do that is membership in MAGL, which is an association of guardians ad litem who are a combination of attorneys who are Category F and mental health professionals who are Category E. So that email list actually is a wealth of information.
Sure.
Yeah.
So what has the pandemic brought out for the kids you're dealing with as a GAL?
Yeah. Well, I think
Has anything been different?
It has been different in terms of how we conduct the investigations, because what used to always be in-person interviews now sometimes is a Zoom interview. And, there was
Do you stare at a lot of blank screens when you're dealing with teens?
No,
Or they
actually.
put their cameras on?
No, they put their cameras on. Yeah. I haven't had
They
anybody.
must know the
turn the camera
gravity
on.
of the situation,
Yeah,
I guess.
I think so.
Well, so share briefly your take on custody disputes and determining the best interests of the child. When you have two parents who see things differently.
Yeah, well,
And I know there's legal framework, but also your approach and your perspective on it.
Sure. And so you mean when I'm representing one side in that dispute?
I suppose so, but as an impartial practitioner, how you would objectively remove yourself from that as you might were
Sure.
to be a judge.
Yeah, I mean, and I always try to do that with cases. I think, back from when I was a law clerk, you are looking from the middle and saying, okay, what does this person want for their child? What does that person want for their child? And what should result for that child? And so those are three different assessments. And so go ahead.
Continue. I'm just wondering, kind of specific factors. Maybe you could hypothetical for me. What are some things you look to? What are some of the? There must be certain elements that you kind of in your mind are part of an early checklist, or when you're evaluating what the situation is.
Yeah, in terms of physical custody. So
Exactly. Yeah.
What time the child spends with each parent.
What time? Why you would determine one way or the other? Schooling.
Yeah, so every circumstance is different, and I'm sure that's an annoying answer to hear, but.
I'm not annoyed, but it's not what I want to know.
And you also don't care about Notre Dame versus BC, which is good.
I know. Yeah.
So I think that I'm trying to answer your question directly. When I come into a situation, I don't make any assumptions about one parent or the other, having a priority in terms of parenting time. I come into a situation and say, okay, well, these parents are now going to live in two different households, so how do we figure out how that child can spend time with both of his or her parents? And so that's the initial assessment.
What would be, let me put it this way.
Yeah.
What would be a reason to not have 50-50? Other than one parent not wanting 50-50. What if one parent wants 50-50, the other doesn't? The other wants some kind of further custody.
What would be a reason not to give 50-50?
Yeah.
I think if there was significant evidence that there was abuse, obviously that would tip the scales. There may be circumstances that would warrant one parent having more time than the other, simply based upon, for example,
How would you evaluate child's relationship with the parents? Would that come into play, your evaluation of the child's relationship with each parent? If a child has a strained relationship with a parent, does that mean that parent perhaps isn't entitled to equal custody?
I don't think I would say that. I think I would consider the strained relationship, and then I would try to work out, well, why is it strained and how can we address the strain? Because you could have a situation where a child doesn't want to be with one parent because there has been some sort of alienation that's been imposed upon the child. So the person that the child purports to want to be with may actually be causing that child to dislike the other parent. So that's a situation that I'll see a lot in guardian ad litem investigations. And that's why you have guardian ad litem involved, is to get to the details. Yeah.
Sure. I'm not going to push any further questions, but I'll have a conversation with you between now and then.
Thank you,
And
Councilor.
thank you for reaching out to me. I'm sorry.
Thank you, Councilor Mary Hurley.
Just
for the record, Uncle Bill went to Notre Dame. His brother Ed, my dad,
Yeah.
went to BC.
Oh, boy.
Oh, wow.
So, I can't get mad at anybody.
How was Thanksgiving?
It was great. They used to take a bus, one of those RV things.
Yeah.
And my Uncle Bill he was there when the Four Horsemen of Notre Dame were there, Luke Rodney.
Yeah.
Oh, wow.
And so he had a friend, Father Thornton, who would get him great tickets. And he would also, because he was an alumni, he would handle tickets between Billy Sullivan, whose daughter went there, and a few other people. So he could get like 16 tickets.
That's great.
And they would take the RV out and stay in motel rooms and go to the game and go there a couple days ahead of time and visit the campus. So,
So awesome.
and Dad went to the BC Law after the war
Wow.
with my mother. So, you know, I love them both. In any event, on the subject at hand, which is you, I reviewed your application. We talked on the phone, and I have a friend who's an appeals court judge, Maureen Walsh. She's nuts too. She has 6 dogs. 6 dogs.
She's
Always trying to
nuts.
get me to
Counselor, I
take
never
her.
said I was nuts.
I tell her she's nuts. So, God bless you for doing that. I had a rescue from a long time ago, lab step combination, sweet as could be, loved her to death, but she also was 85 pounds, and when she saw a squirrel, I went flying. So the next dog was a Westie, and then I adopted another rescue, and he, for some reason, got mad at me, and not once but twice, jumped up on my white couch, looked me straight in the eye, and with tears in my eyes, I brought him back. I went back a couple days later to bring all the, I spent a fortune on this dog between
Yeah.
everything. So I cried when I dropped the dog off. And I went to bring back papers. He was already readopted. So my guilt was assuaged with that. And now I have a 2-year-old Maggie, who's another Westie.
She's a sweetie.
And there's a real struggle going on as to who's the boss. But hopefully, I think you're going to do a great job. You got a great background. The kinds of things you're involved in outside of the law tell me that you got a balanced life. And other than the fact that I think anybody who wants to be a probate court judge is crazy, I wish you the best of luck. I also have to go back to Springfield this afternoon to swear in one of my folks who became a district court judge, and we're doing that today. So good luck to you. I'll be voting for you, and keep up the good work.
Thank you, Counselor.
Thank you. Councilor Ferrara.
Thank you. You and I had a nice conversation on the phone. I think you understand the system very well. You know, my worst day of my life, one of my worst days, standing before the probate judge who's yelling and screaming that joint physical custody doesn't work. After the GAL, the Child and Family, and wherever we went in Boston, recommended it. And it worked out perfectly. I have 3 unbelievable daughters that are now 23, 28, and 30. And I'm the luckiest dad in the world that I got to have them at least half time when I go a house 2 houses away, so we can see them every day.
Yeah.
But, you know, that really bugs me. And every time someone comes before us with a probate court, I want to make sure that the norm is both parents have equal parenting time. And I think that you did declare to me that that's your opinion, and that's how it should be, all other things being equal. So I appreciate you applying. I heard great things about you from Councilor Iannella right away, and Councilor Duff as well. So you have my support next week. You're doing a great job.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Councilor Robert Judo.
Thank you very much. Well, you've had 2 wonderful witnesses here, and that means a lot to me. And I had a very long talk with Judge Menino, Judge Menino, I'm sorry. And he goes way back with you. And he tells me that you have the uncanny ability to be able to tell when a witness is telling the truth or not. Is that true? We need more people like you on the bench.
I try.
Yeah.
We'll certainly try, yes.
Yeah, no, so I'm going to be probably cast vote for you next one.
Thank you, sir.
Thanks.
Thank you, Councilor Devaney.
Thank you. Nice to
Sorry.
see you
Nice
again.
to see you again.
I think it was 4 hours that we met. It was great, and I really appreciate you coming. I'd like to ask you, first of all, I'm concerned about removal. And I'll tell you this case, because it only, Councilor Iannello were on 21 years ago when this judge was voted, and to the probate court. So about a year later, I read in the Globe some action she took, and they thought it was something to write about. So she asked this judge if she could bring her three little children, and they were toddlers, to Oregon and Massachusetts. And she had no family there. She knew a job waiting. She didn't know anyone there. And anyway, the judge allowed her. And I looked into it, and the father was very devoted to the children. He lived here, he used to see them almost every day. He would go Christmas Eve and stay overnight to see them in the morning and in the presents. So anyway, what she did, and I hope that they threw away visitation, I hate that word, but anyway, this judge gave the father, this good father, visitation on a computer from 6 to 7 at night. What is your criteria for removal? And first of all, I mean, it was vindictive. I mean, he loved the children, he was a good father, he worked well with the mother, and just sad because he's divorced from his children, literally. You know. So tell me what your criteria is for allowing one of the partners to move the children.
Sure, well, the
Out of state, we're talking.
Yeah, right. So under 20830, which is the removal statute, there's an assessment that needs to be made. First you have to either have permission from the other parent, and obviously these people, they're in court because they didn't have that permission. You have to show good cause to remove, and the analysis of the case depends on the circumstances. So if there are parents who have, if there's one person who has more time, the primary parent, I'll call them, and the other one has not as much parenting time, there's an assessment that's done, which is a real advantage assessment. If the parents have equal parenting time, the assessment is slightly different. So if in your case it was one parent with primary parenting.
You're talking across the state.
Yeah.
I mean, across the country.
So the real advantage, you have to look first at the parent that wants to make the moves, the primary custodian. You have to look at whether that move is advantageous to that parent. So in other words, is there a good reason, a real advantage for that person to move? So in your example, does she have a new job that pays 3 times as much as her current job? Does she have a significant number of family members in that new place? Because that would be a reason to move. You're surrounded by family, you're supported, and the kids have people that are familiar with. So that's the first step in that analysis. And then if you say, yes, there is a real advantage for that parent, then you look at the best interest of the children. And you also have to be aware of whether there was motivation to disadvantage the other parent. So are you moving, like you said, out of spite, right? If you're moving out of spite, that's not a removal that should be
I was
allowed.
heartbroken when I read that. I like your philosophy, and I like your writing. You're a good writer, and very easy to read. And why don't you tell us about that case? I thought it was very interesting because it was sole custody to the father. And, we have someone here from the fatherhood group, and, has been fighting for years. And they've come a little way, but not all the way for fathers. And tell us about that. I thought it was great.
The case that you're referring to, it was an interesting situation. So the children lived with mom in the Boston area, but one of the children was estranged from mom and was staying with a third party, staying with a friend of the family. And my client, the father, lived in New York, and he sought to get custody of the children so that he could make decisions on their behalf, so that he could figure out
School.
housing, school, everything for those kids who did not want to be with their mom. And so he ended up filing a complaint for removal so that he could take custody of the children and care for them in New York or from New York and arrange.
I mean, she wasn't cooperating at all about school or any kind of, she making it really difficult, really alienated the children.
That was absolutely a situation where alienation of the children.
No, I thought that was interesting. Now, I love the way that you got into law. And now, tell us, the years that you were in business, how many years?
16.
Yeah, how does that contribute to making you a better judge?
Sure. I think, as a consultant, one of the things that you do is you walk into the room and your job is to get a group of people with a lot of different interests and different priorities to come together to make that business better in some way. And so a lot of the skills that I learned as a consultant, I apply every day in my practice as a lawyer because you're doing the same thing. It's just regarding a family instead of a business. And so I learned a lot during that time about how to deal with people and how to try to come to resolution. And that's a large part of what I do now.
Well, I'll tell you, I don't have a crystal ball to know about judges, and sometimes I'm let down. And I know from meeting with you and your compassion and your empathy that I look for in your background, the cases you had, I know that you would do the right thing, and I'm thinking about that. Now, we talked about a lot of people. Now, tell me about that horrific case about the twins. Were the twins involved? Maybe you're wrong.
That might have been some other case.
Okay, maybe that was it, and there was a mother's boyfriend involved.
No.
Okay, that's okay.
That was probably Mr. Kane.
Oh my God. Okay, so what has been the most rewarding outcome of a case that you've had?
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I remember when you asked me that when we were eating the largest waffle I've ever seen in my life.
Now you can think about it.
That's right, and I'm hungry, as I suspect all of you are. So I think one of the most important cases to me was actually a client for whom I did a series of different actions. So I represented a gentleman in his divorce, and I think he got divorced in 2013 maybe. And then subsequent to that, of course, and at the time, we had agreed that his wife would have more parenting time than he, in part because one of the kids at the time was like 3 years old. And so he said, okay, you know what, I want equal custody, but let's resolve this now so that we're not in court, and I will work to get more time with my kids over, as they get older. And I will tell you that in a series of actions, and this is one of the cases in my application, over a series of years, there have been subsequent modifications to that case, and he now has equal time with his kids. And that's been the most rewarding.
How did you decide to go into this family law, coming from a business area, when you think of all the types of law? How did you decide that?
So you're saying that management in information technology, not
Well,
logic,
I thought you'd be in family law or something. No, seriously.
Yeah, that's a good question. So when I was a consultant, I started at Headstrong in 1989, and in 1998, I began to work in the office of the general counsel at that consulting firm. So I began to work directly with the lawyers of the company. And I got interested in it, and I enjoyed doing the legal work. And I thought, you know what? Why don't I go to law school? And with the support of my employer, I did. I applied to several law schools. I was in D.C. at the time, so I applied to American University. I applied also to Suffolk and New England here. And I was fortunate enough to get a full scholarship to New England, so guess what my decision was? And to New England. And it's a great school. I love it.
I love your age, the experience, because I want life experience too. and you reached out and helped people. And, you know, you get a 5-year-old, he never did anything in community, church, or anything. And to me, that's important, what you're bringing to the bench. And your life experience, too. And you have done a lot for disabled and everything, and I served on a commission of disability for 24 years, so I appreciate what you're doing. But, you know, so would you say that you represented more men or more women?
You know, if I had to head count, probably a little bit more than 50% men, but pretty equal.
Well, that's
It's never a criteria.
That's not the norm that I've
Yeah.
known in the 22 years, yeah. How do you think the probate family court could be improved?
How much time?
Yeah, really. That's a big one.
I don't mean to make light of it, but I think obviously that any organization can be improved in a number of ways. Probate family court, improving it, I think, gosh, we could do so much with automation that I think hasn't yet been done. I think the court's on the precipice of making changes like that, in part prompted by COVID, because of necessity. We all had to learn how to use Zoom, and some people had to learn how to turn on a computer.
Yeah, you know, the one thing that I was concerned about of everything was the 209s. Because how do you see someone in Zoom? You want to look them in the eye, you want to see their body language, and that concerned me. And I heard in some of the courts they were doing it on the phone during the pandemic.
Oh, I think most of the 209 Ks that I'm aware of have been in person still.
Yeah, well, I'm telling you something that's been here.
Yeah,
Tell me that's
yeah.
been on the phone. I said,
That's
oh,
terrible.
God. But, and, you know, I was concerned about the pandemic, what it's doing for, that we've lost those children. We don't know what's happening to them because they're not going to school. And the teacher would see if they had a bruise or if they had a problem, they weren't talking, whatever. We lost all that in the pandemic, you know, really, or even domestic abuse, you know. Yeah, so, now, you only apply to
Probate family, that's it.
yeah,
Yes.
right. So you don't see, I mean, how's it changed since you've been here? I mean, to me, every week I'm reading about a child missing or killed or beaten and whatever, and it just seems to be increasing.
Yeah.
And that's what I see. Do you see that happening in your practice?
I think that the types of cases that you're describing and are rightly concerned about, I think those, you would see those primarily in the juvenile court. I don't personally in my practice see as much of that, because what I'm particularly dealing with are people who are divorcing, or
But they have children.
They do.
They have children, so it overlaps, that's why I was.
Oh, yeah, there's absolutely a big overlap.
Yeah. So, no, as I said, I liked your background and we talked and I meet with everyone because it's more than just on paper. I get to know you personally and what your opinions are and your philosophy. And you're bringing that to the bench, you really are. And your family and your sisters and all of that you've gone through. So, no, I'm not going to. They put 3 in today, and we're like reading them in and out, and so on. And I'm being timed, so I think our time is up. The bell might ring, I don't know. But anyway, I appreciate it. I just don't feel that you should be held to this 15-minute rule. I'm sure that the new federal judge isn't replying in 15 minutes. I know because I heard her, and she's super. But anyway, I'm pleased, and you have to have the age, you have to have the experience, and you've got it all. And I love animals, so you've got everything going. So I'm very pleased, and I'm glad that you applied, and I'm happy that it came through this way, because sometimes it's very long and belated, so I'm glad for that. So thank you for all the time you afforded me. Again, I always say it, and I can't do anything about it. You didn't have 21 of the JNC to interview you, and it just goes out and no one says anything, but I think it's important. If they're going to vote on someone, they should see them, they should talk to them, and that's my But anyway, it's not Jan's problem, it's not mine, and thank you for applying, and I'm so pleased that you're here, and, you know, please don't be voting for you.
Thank you very much.
Yes, thank you.
Thank you very much. I don't have any questions. We had a lengthy conversation at my office. I was impressed with the folks you brought here today, Judge Gibson, Attorney Marty Kane. Like I said, we had a long conversation. We discussed alimony, child support, removal statutes. We even talked about estates, little estates as well. Guardian ad litems, attorneys, also attorneys for the children. It doesn't happen as much today. But I was very impressed with you, and when your name comes before the council next week, or I guess maybe it could be 2 weeks, but the next time we have a formal meeting, I'll be more than happy to put your name before the council. Thank you very much. Excuse me, whatever. Is there anyone here in opposition to the nomination? There being no one in opposition?
Last minute.
Last minute.